years have brought a series of unexpected challenges to the prevailing world order since the end of the Second World War, reiterating disconcerting similarities with the roaring 20s of the 20th century, which in their turn had given the tone for the lifestyle and consumption culture of at least two generations, until the revolutionary zeitgeist of the 1960s mercilessly reset the existential morale. F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby appeared as a literary work which both fundamentally mirrored and influenced the era of the time of its publication in 1925, deconstructed the classical Bildungsroman in a manner comparable to Thomas Mann's The Zauberbag or The Magic Mountain from 1924, and opened the way towards future understandings of the novel as a genre, mostly in Western cultures. As two larger-than-life anti-Bildungsromane of the mid-1920s, both The Magic Mountain and The Great Gatsby narrate about life and change, about the lessons to be learned before becoming a full-fledged grown-up. On the one hand, a highly ambiguous and elusive literary work, The Magic Mountain from 1924 blends a scrupulous realism with deeper symbolic undertones. Within this complexity, it forces the reader to weigh up the artistic significance of the pattern of events set out within the narrative, in itself a difficult task, given the overall ironic tone of the narrator. It was often compared, both by critics and by Thomas Mann himself, to a symphonic work orchestrated with a number of themes and leitmotifs transcending the classical literary norm into levels of philosophical meditation. While the main narrative thread, which is that of a typical Bildungsroman, focuses on the protagonist's life, the immature Hans Castorp leaves his home and learns about art, culture, politics, human frailty, and love. Embedded within this vast novel are extended reflections on the experience of time, music, nationalism, social issues, and changes in the natural world. Consequently, Castorp's sojourn in the rarefied air of the Magic Mountain, geographically located in Davos, high up in the Swiss Alps, thus provides him with a panoramic view of the pre-First World War European civilization and its discontents. On the other hand, The Great Gatsby from 1925 might simultaneously be seen as a cautionary tale of the decadent downside of the American dream, and as a portrayal of the limits and realities of America's myth of social and class mobility, as well as of the inevitably hopeless lower-class aspirations to rise above the stations of their birth. Using elements of irony and tragic ending, the novel delves into themes of excesses of the rich and recklessness of youth. It clearly shows Fitzgerald's disillusionment with the American dream, a concept he himself seemed to have come to be associated with more than any other writer of the 20th century, encompassing love, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness in the context of the hedonistic jazz age. Again, a name for the era which Fitzgerald claimed to have coined. Gatsby's failure to realize that the American dream resides in its very existence purely in the minds of those as materialistic as himself is a metaphor for those who resist change and authentic progress. The American dream pursued by Gatsby is, in reality, a nightmare, bringing nothing but loneliness, misery, and disillusionment to those who chase it, as in the process they become painfully aware of its unsustainability and ultimately its unattainability. The current essay observes critically Takarazuka Revue staging of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby in historical and analytical approach. Since its first performance, based on The Great Gatsby in 1991 and 1992 at the main theater in Takarazuka City, northwestern of Osaka, Takarazuka Grand Theater, respectively in Tokyo at Tokyo Takarazuka Theater by Snow Troupe, through Moon Troupe's renewed offering in 2008 at Nisei Theater in Japan's capital, until the most recent, fully revised version in 2022, likewise by Moon Troupe, Takarazuka Revue Company and its administrative staff addresses F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel with a sense of curiosity and awe, in relation to its exposure to the American dream and the various concatenations resulting from its global impact. Concurrently, it dares to question the validity of the ideals and existential models, as well as the ideological systems detailed in The Great Gatsby, in a manner which has become Takarazuka Revue's hallmark. The attempt to recalibrate the humanity of the characters and their relationships, brought forth on stage by means of performative representation, beyond their historical geographic localization, and to confer them universal value, or to challenge precisely that very universal value. While The Great Gatsby has famously been investigated from a great variety of perspectives, for instance, the prevalence and illusionary nature of the American dream, the entrenched class disparities and lack of social mobility in modern societies, as revealed by the US-American society of the first decades of the 20th century, the highly sensitive themes of race, displacement, otherness, and ethnic socio-economic tensions within the quickly developing consumption society, the perception and evaluation of sexuality, gender, and identity, and their intersection with technological advancement and the perils of environmental destruction resulted from the pursuit of self-interest. The forthcoming analysis brings into the spotlight mainly the mechanisms of love, masculinity, and wealth in their intertwinings within The Great Gatsby's framework, as these are the major elements demarcating Takarazuka Revue's theatrical interpretation of most, if not all, stage adaptations. Drawing on Baz Luhrmann's 2013 partially revolutionary, partially contradictory cinematic interpretation of J. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, Takarazuka Revue Company released its own live performance by mid-2022, including musical material from the former versions in 1991, 1992, and 2008, but being fully revised as dramaturgic approach, directorial vision, and general message. The conclusion of this essay will draw on these findings and outline research directions for the future, which might lead to a more profound understanding of the enduring fascination and deeper layers of significance The Great Gatsby delivers 1 century after its publication, increasingly on a global level. Traditionally associated with strictly conservative gender politics and socio-economic hierarchies, military-like instruction methods and performance standards, which transcend the wildest expectations while pushing the entertainment industry beyond the limitations of technological progress, fans' requirements, and technocrats' visions, Takarazuka Revue has been accompanying Japan since its foundation in 1914. Simultaneously a faithful mirror of Japanese society and a lucid barometer-like institution for the future, Takarazuka Revue's hallmark is its all-female cast, impersonating both male and female roles, otokoyaku, respectively musumeyaku, divided in 5 performing troupes, which bring on the stages of the 2 major theaters in West Japan, that is Takarazuka Grand Theater in the city of Takarazuka, and in East Japan, that is Tokyo Takarazuka Theater in the posh district of Ginza in Japan's capital, during 10 weekly performances throughout the entire year. A huge diversity of topics covering all genres and historical geographical areas. These are embedded in theatrical live performances with Western popular music, laborious choreographies, and impressive singing acts, luxurious stage designs, sparkling and quickly changing costumes, compounded by discrete displays of individual excellence. Moreover, since 1974's blockbuster, The Rose of Versailles, directed by Ueda Shinji, Takarazuka Revue has been essentially circumscribing the so-called shoujo culture, the framework delineating femininity, feminine identity, and feminine corporality by means of instrumentalizing female teenagers within Japan's rapacious systems juxtaposing consumerism, sexuality, and public discourses on love, marriage, reproduction. In recent years, especially since the beginning of the new era in Japanese historiography in 2019, the so-called Reiwa period, and even more accelerated since the big reset posited by the global pandemic of 2020 and 2022, a tremendous paradigm shift has been occurring, with a renewed focus on expanding the traditional business model centered around deep fandom, referring to a rigidly delineated fan community composed mainly of stay-at-home housewives and financially powerful female seniors age 35 and above, towards a more diverse consumer basis to include male theatergoers of all ages, reflected in correspondingly diversified performances to encompass a greater variety of preferences, interests, and ideals. Building heavily on Baz Luhrmann's directorial perspective, visible in the dynamic juxtaposition of vivid visuals and eclectic musical styles, but most preeminently in the leitmotif-like presence of the blue-colored glasses above the garage managed by the mechanic George Wilson and his wife Myrtle, Tom Bachanan's affair partner, Takarazuka Revue's version of The Great Gatsby from 2022 recreates the atmosphere of the 1920s America with a crucial twist, to be outlined later on. This was Takarazuka Revue's third tackling of F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, first time under the Japanese official translation title of the literary work Karenairu Gatsby, under which Baz Luhrmann's movie has also been translated. It had been presented in 1991 and 1992 by the Snow Troupe, running at Takarazuka Grand Theatre from 8 August 1991 until 17 September 1991, and at Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre from 1st December 1991 until 25 December 1991, and at Chunichi Theatre in Nagoya from 2nd February 1992 until 17 February 1992, starring Mori Keaki as J. Gatsby. Globally, it was the first time that The Great Gatsby was presented on stage as a musical performance. Among Takarazuka Revue's 5 currently performing troupes, that is, Flower Troupe, Moon Troupe, Snow Troupe, Star Troupe, and Cosmos Troupe, each of them being associated with specific characteristics which then color the message of the performances themselves, Snow Troupe stands out due to its conservative atmosphere in bringing forth so-called traditional Japan with its classic imagery and the stress ratio between giri, or social obligations, and ninjo, or individual emotions, as the highest form of human transcendence, encapsulated within plots commonly set in pre-modern Japan. Therefore, one of Snow Troupe's major features is the referential Japanese-ness in the wakonyosai, that is, Japanese spirit or roots and Western technology or knowledge framework, which underlies Takarazuka Revue's hybridity in tune with Japan's modernity and delivers the crucial Japanizing elements to all its performances, Japan-related or not. Inaugurated in 1924, simultaneously with the opening of the first Takarazuka Grand Theatre in the city of Takarazuka, Snow Troupe is considered the upholder of traditional dance and opera for the entire company. In its rendition of Western-based material, it has somehow the reputation of being the vanguard of classical Japanese drama. On this backdrop, the fact that it premiered in Japan in 1996, the Vienna original musical Elizabeth, The Rondo of Love and Death from 1992, which would turn into one of Takarazuka Revue's long-term blockbusters, has symbolical underpinnings, with appropriation and Japanization being among the main preoccupations. Thus, by employing the Snow Troupe in its staging of The Great Gatsby, Takarazuka Revue's administrators brought home the perils of extravagant materialism encompassed in the concept of the American dream, which had been unconditionally imported to Japan after the Second World War, this time on the specific background of the burst of the bubble economy at the beginning of the 1990s and the subsequent socio-economic and political cultural sense of disorientation. Despite being lavishly staged in Takarazuka Revue spirit of the 1970s and 1980s, with its seemingly infinite resources of architectural design, flamboyant costumes, and overwhelming makeup and hairstyling displays, echoing the updated excess and conspicuous consumerism of the 1920s USA, the 1991-1992 version of The Great Gatsby included subtle hints of warning related to the American model of existential exuberance based mainly on materialist achievements and lacking solid values underneath the glittering surface. In the same manner, Takarazuka Revue's second iteration of The Great Gatsby from 2008, staged by Moon Troupe from 1st September 2008 until 23rd September 2008 at Nisei Theatre in Tokyo, with Sena Jun, one of the troupe's most iconic top star otokoyaku in recent decades, as J. Gatsby, kept up with the atmosphere of cautionary luxury, but the Japanese title was changed into its katakana transliteration as Great Gatsby. The discreet distancing from the officially established translation of the title served as a reinforcement of the deepening, but the Japanese title was changed into katakana transliteration as Great Gatsby. The discreet distancing from the officially established translation of the title served as a reinforcement of the deepening of mistrust in US-American mediated standards, while carefully avoiding mainstream exposure through the placement of the performance at the smaller theater hall. The employment of the Moon Troupe, created in 1921 and commonly employed with a subliminally conveyed goal to push forward the performance strategy as exemplified in such instances when it staged the world premieres of Mon Paris in 1927, The Rose of Versailles in 1974 and Gone with the Wind in 1977, with meticulous attention to group performances and in particular to powerful expression in chorus singing, and numerous adaptations from Western dramas, additionally highlighted the increasing distance between the initial American dream and its quotidian reality in one of USA's staunchest allies since the Second World War. The fact that precisely during the Great Gatsby's second run, the so-called Lehman Shock, the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers on 15 September 2008 occurred and impacted Japan more than any other nation is of course pure coincidence, given Takarazuka Revue Company's month-long preparation protocols prior to the manifestation of the performances themselves. But it also appeared as an almost divinely timed and ironic concretization of the catastrophic consequences of mindlessly, blindly following the USA in its historical advancement. When the same Moon Troupe restaged The Great Gatsby in 2022 at Takarazuka Grand Theatre from 22nd July 2022 until 28 July and from 19 August 2022 until 22nd August 2022 due to health disruptions of the main cast caused by the coronavirus, and at Tokyo Takarazuka Theatre from 10th September 2022 until 9 October 2022, it not only came with a fresh directorial vision and new musical arrangements, except for the main song, as well as a visibly more conservative stage design, which aligned with the global tragedy of the coronavirus pandemic and the necessity of restraint, but displayed a fully different message compared to its previous two versions. The love story between top star otokoyakus Tsukishiro Kanato, J. Gatsby, and top star musumeyakus Umino Mitsuki, Daisy Buchanan, was not doomed due to the almost criminal superficiality of the era, but was caused by Daisy's decision to respect her duty as mother and wife. J. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby explored, to a certain extent, societal gender expectations, exemplifying in Daisy Buchanan's character the marginalization of women in the East Egg social class that Fitzgerald depicted. As an upper-class white woman living in East Egg during that time period in America, Daisy had to adhere to certain social regulations and pressures, including, but certainly not limited to, actively filling the role of dutiful wife, mother, manager of the house, charming socialite. The theme of the female familial role within The Great Gatsby went hand in hand with that of the ideal family unit, associated with the great American dream. A dream that goes unrealized for Gatsby and Daisy in Fitzgerald's prose and in Takarazuka Revue's reinforcement of feminist values. Nonetheless, where in Fitzgerald's novel, women powerless, compelled to obey rules and regulations they could not challenge or change except for self-declared outcasts, In Takarazuka Revue's 2022 version, Daisy makes the very conscious decision to pursue or to return to her role of mother and wife, despite her possibly authentic love towards Great Gatsby. Her decision is a clear return, Japanese audiences are told, to the hegemonic femininity of Japan's modernity as encompassed in the slogan of Good Wife, Wise Mother, as coined by the educator Nakamura Masanao in 1865, which is the foundation of the post-war Japanese model of the stay-at-home housewives, or sengyoshufu, and mothers within patterns of gender hierarchies, marital expectations, and socio-economic mechanisms crystallized by late 1960s and left greatly unchallenged until the late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo's Abenomics by mid-2015. Economic strategies meant to empower and liberate women emerged not out of sudden progressive visions within Japan's ruling political establishment, but as disparate measures against unprecedented demographic challenges. Generally, in the Great Gatsby's versions throughout all media, Daisy is portrayed as a superficial, fun-loving young lady, submitting to the flare of time and annoyed but not extremely distraught by her husband's affairs and brutish demeanor. She follows the flow of her life without questions or resistance, including her relationship with her daughter, who is mostly very sporadically mentioned or displayed. In Takarazuka Revue's 2022 version of The Great Gatsby, a crucial shift occurs, with Daisy being significantly more involved in her daughter's life, who is displayed on stage as a newborn baby whom she loves dearly and cares for deeply. Throughout the performance, Daisy's motherly tenderness is displayed repeatedly, leading to the denouement as being a result of her choice between her daughter and Jay. This adds an empowering dimension to Daisy's character, highlighting the various shifts pertaining to being a woman in late modern Japan and globally. Freedom entails responsibility, of which for woman motherhood is the highest one. This interpretation of the Gatsby-Daisy dynamic distances itself at the same time from the carnivore women or nikushoku-kei joshi or aggressive women stereotype emerged by mid-2000s from the alternative femininity of the post-war shoujo, with her overwhelming energy pushing masculinity to its edge, and promotes a prototype of femininity focused on motherhood and therefore on the future. In this focus on the future lies the strength of Takarazuka Revue's Daisy. Gatsby is the past, a past which cannot be changed even by a larger-than-history present. In the central scene of the performance, unique in its tremendous emotionality, the green light at the end of Daisy's dock brings into dramaturgic awareness Gatsby's unreachable aspirations, as they are based on an immutable past, and casts a spectral glow over his romantic yearning, as he explains it in his song Before the Sunrise, the main song of the performance and the only musical element carried over from previous versions.
長い間さまよったいつ果てるとも知れぬ泥沼を僕は這いつくばった今時が流れて夜が明けようとしている僕は変わって しまっただろうか君も変わっているかもしれないでも僕は取り戻そう二人のあの時懐かしいあの愛の時朝日の昇る前にそう僕は取り戻そう二人のあの夢輝ける未来あふれる朝日の昇る前に朝日の昇る前に朝日の昇る
But Penny, Daisy's daughter, is the future. Despite the mutual romantic affection between Jay Gatsby and Daisy, which is clearly, unequivocally displayed on stage, Pammy has absolute priority in Daisy's life. As her mother, she must obey to it. In this interpretation, Daisy does not conveniently throw away her extramarital lover when things get tough, respectively does not give up her lover for a safe but meaningless marriage, which was the message in the initial novel and its subsequent cross-media reiterations. But instead she simply chooses the future, in accordance with her nature as a mother. Due to Takarazuka Revue's intrinsic set of conventions named the Violet Code, or Sumire Kodo, which prohibits any non-stylized display of ugliness such as violent death, open sexuality, bloody encounters, as well as allusions to mundane events such as medical procedures to which biological birth counts, children, and more specifically newborn babies, are extremely seldom represented as such on Takarazuka Revue stage, solely when the dramaturgic logic explicitly requires it. One such very rare example was the presence on stage of Napoleon Bonaparte's son, Napoleon II, as a newborn baby in the performance Napoleon, the Man Who Never Sleeps, Beyond Love and Glory, performed by Star Troupe in 2014, who had served as a justification for Napoleon's divorce from his first wife and the great love of his life, Josephine. In order to be able to secure a legitimate blood-related successor, as Josephine reportedly had repeatedly failed to deliver it and time was running short for the warrior emperor, the remarriage of Empress Marie-Louise, daughter of Emperor Francis I of Austria, for political reasons, was the only solution. Similarly, Pammy's presence on stage underscores Daisy's true nature and allows for a fresh approach to the Great Gatsby's conglomerate, not anymore one of superficiality, mindless materialism and loss, but one of self-aware future-oriented choices. Jay Gatsby's sense of hope, which had transcended Baz Luhrmann's directorial vision in Nick Carraway's recollection of his friend, metamorphoses in Takarazuka Revue's 2022 performance into faith in oneself and ultimately in others, due to Daisy's choice. Daisy's motherhood appears as the solution to The Great Gatsby, timeless tale of love, ambition, and the pursuit of the American dream, and delivers to audiences grappling with issues of wealth, inequality, social mobility, and changing gender norms, an apparently plain solution to their struggles. Deeply conservative and one-sided at its core, Takarazuka Revue's interpretation in early 2020s serves as a reminder of both the dangers of excess and of the importance of authenticity and human connection in an increasingly materialist runaway world. Throughout the more than 100 years since its publication, The Great Gatsby has been adapted from its initial literary form into various media, but managed to largely maintain its fundamental narrative of disenchantment and purposelessness, while delivering insights into the morals of the most exuberant and dangerously so period of time in recent history, the 1920s. Compared to the solid monumentality of its anti-Bildungsroman counterpart, Thomas Mann's The Zauberbag or The Magic Mountain, published only 1 year earlier, F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby appears as both inconspicuously fluid and irresistibly charming. There are no grand discussions or profound concepts, no worries and no battles, only the nonchalant, live-in-the-moment ideology and the carelessness accompanying the underlying ideology of what has come to be associated with the American dream. Even the otherwise seemingly central love story between Jay Gatsby and Daisy Buchanan is framed as one further element within its tapestry. There are no clear protagonists and antagonists. The hero's journey does not lead to self-awareness and service. These have been replaced with over-the-top materialist aspirations and a full disregard for other humans in the era of anything goes. Something Baz Luhrmann picked off in his 2013 blockbuster, bringing into the spotlight Jay Gatsby both restlessly ambitious and painfully vulnerable, who somehow departed from his literary model but did not accomplish the profound revision of the novel's status quo, reeking of existential emptiness. When it first staged The Great Gatsby, Takarazuka Revue sought to encapsulate the delusional nature of American mechanisms underneath its spectacular advertising and marketing strategies. At the beginning of what would be labeled the Lost Decade in 1991 and 1992, Takarazuka Revue's administrators sensed that a radical examination of what had brought Japan, once again, to the brink of collapse was the only way to move forward, and employed the cynic adaptation of the literary work which had been praised as the most insightful description of the USA and post-war Japan success. In a sort of cosmic irony of history, Takarazuka Revue's 2008 second staging coincided with the most brutal financial crisis since the Great Depression of 1929 in real time. In both versions, The Great Gatsby followed the conservative way of displaying on stage the 1920s and the people of that era, but placed on the background of Japanese reality of early 1990s, respectively late 2000s, so that the convulsions of those decades were portrayed both extremely accurately in parallel perspectives with all their vicious repetitiveness. Takarazuka Revue third, The Great Gatsby version from 2022, eventually broke with the tradition of focusing on the critical orchestration of a decadent past and looked at the lessons which could be learned so that one can move on. In Daisy's motherhood, the alternative to mindless entertainment and materialist preoccupations was discovered, so that motherly love emerges as a solution to both her embattled emotions, as she is represented on stage, and to society's disorientation. Maternal affection transcends romantic love. Daisy's choice does not imply sacrifice. She simply moves forward in life, ensuring that the future is better than the past and the present. Her decision for her husband does not reinforce the classical notion of the nuclear family, included as a mandatory part of the so-called American dream. Instead, it fortifies her commitment to the future, as embodied by her daughter. Motherhood is the third way of comprehending feminine identity, overcoming divisive identity politics and sublimating the semiotic chaos in its manifestation in the symbolic order, thus metamorphosing Cora's creativity into the peace-promising birthplace of a new world order. Daisy turns, consequently, into an archetype of fresh femininity with a maternal love at its core. In doing so, Takarazuka Revue's administrators shift away from the almighty presence of the male protagonist and his all-encompassing representation by the otokoyaku as carrier of cathartic significance towards the authentic empowerment of female protagonists and the elevation of musumeyaku, mostly treated as accessories to otokoyaku's unmatched glamour, to the status of an independent entity. In the larger scheme of things, Takarazuka Revue's 2022 The Great Gatsby offers valid pathways towards redemption from decades of crisis, with focus on a future possible even when the root causes of the perilous present have not yet been fully figured out. Sometimes, moving on by all means is more important than understanding what has been going on so far. Thank you and welcome to the future.